Hey everyone, thank you very much for watching my brand new video. Today on this very humid day, we're going to be looking at doing the rear stabilizers on your 04 to 08 Grand Prix. Although this does apply to any of that generation, Impalas, Buicks, anything like that. We are just going to go through the steps and what it is to change. It's actually not that hard, but it can be a little bit tricky. I also have a video on how to check your stabilizers and links, so make sure to check that out as well. But I'm not going to waste any more time. Let's get right to it. So I've already begun part of the video itself here, and because some of it's already pretty straightforward in regards, I've already taken off the wheels and I've jacked the car up. Before we get started and looking at anything, I just want to remind you to always be safe. Make sure you're doing the right thing here. Don't just do this on jacks. Make sure you're using jack stands. You have the car supported correctly and with a sturdy. Have the wheels chalked if possible, and make sure that everything is good and secure before you get started. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to compare the parts themselves to make sure that they're all exact to fit. You'd hate to know that you start taking things apart and you have the wrong part. Let's say the stabilizer is wrong, and if this is your only car, how are you getting to the parts shop to get a replacement? So you want to make sure that the parts are the same. There may be design changes or variances. Like if, for example, if you look at this one here, this one actually has greasable nipples to keep your stabilizer link greased up, versus the stock manufacturer ones do not. But as you can see, lengthwise and everything, it's the same all the way up. It's a thicker one. It's a heavy duty one that I've gotten to go along with my I'm going with a heavier duty stabilizer bar. So you can see that that looks good. And then I've laid down the stabilizer bar right underneath so we can do a comparison. Now, of course, by looking at it, you can tell I've gone with a aftermarket one, but if that's not necessary for you, this is just as much a maintenance video as it is an upgrade video, because you can do the same type of process and procedure for upgrading and for maintenance. So really what this is just looking. And what you're just looking is you're going to look at the bar and compare that everything lines up and it moves along the same type of bends and everything. By looking at it and analyzing, we can tell that everything does look good. So we can begin, and the first thing we do is we take off the links. And of course, before you begin, you want to make sure you spray down everything. I've already begun, but again, I'll just show you. So anywhere where you're going to be loosening, so you're looking at here, down over here, and over here. Now, if you're planning to do any other work, it wouldn't hurt to spray those down. Also, it wouldn't hurt to spray things down as a kind of a maintenance anyway. So, for example, on the trailing arms, down here, you know, the strut bolts, anything like that, even up and down in there. Doesn't hurt to spray things down to help keep rust and corrosion at bay. And once that's settled in, then you begin. Before we start, just as a word of caution, it wouldn't hurt to have some power tools to do something like this. In regards to having compressor or anything, if not, you have to do by hand. And for example, if you look at this here, you can see it's quite rusty. But we'll give it a go, and we'll see what happens. And if we need to, we'll even cut. But I'm hoping we don't have to get to that level. So the first bolt we're going to go after is the top one up here, which is a 15 mil bolt. So we're going to go with that. It's a 15 mils you see here. Just going to put that on. We're going to give it a go and see what happens. Okay, it is spinning there right now. Let's see. Seized on pretty good. We're going to try and get a wrench back there. So I've applied a wrench on. It's a 14 millimeter wrench. Before I go ahead and give it the go with the 15, make sure, of course, you're being safe. Watch out for the brake lines, because if this spins, it could pitch the wrench one way or the other. And of course, watch your fingers as well. So we're going to go and put this on here. Okay, we are getting some movement off there, which is good. course, it is quite rusted. Get back on there. Seems to have lost. There, okay, got it. Ooh. Okay, you can see what I was talking about. Though. You see it pitched it. The rust is going to give it some resistance, and it's going to want to turn the wrench versus turning the bolt. So again, watch your fingers, watch your hands. Practice safety here. This I could see being much harder to do if you're doing by hand anyways. Okay. Alright, so ultimately I had to resort to getting a grinder and cutting it off. This is actually a common problem on these cars. As you can see, I've cut it here. They're still hot. I'm not even touching those bolts yet. You can see they're down there. They tend to rust and seize up. And cutting may have to be a resort. I went through a couple of different things. I tried everything from vice grips and everything. I didn't film all that because ultimately I had a feeling we're going to have to grind it out just from how it's seized up. But I said, let me try a few things. Ultimately, though, I just went and I cut it. I don't have anything to show you directly on how to cut it. I didn't actually film. Maybe I'll... Actually, if I do the other side, maybe I'll show you that. Because I haven't done the other side yet. But ultimately, that's what we have to do. I'm going to actually try, of course, just try and take it off with the 15 mil socket and so on and see if hopefully the other side comes out. If not, then we'll have to resort to cutting and then I'll show you then. But ultimately, all I did is I brought the blade and the grinder back here and of course, there has to be extreme caution because you got the brake line here. You got a gas tank right over there. And of course, you got cladding and stuff that can... can ignite, catch fire, get sparks on it. Should be okay though. Everything's pretty resilient. And I just went in and I ran the saw up and I cut the bolt right off. And ultimately that's how we got everything off here. As you can see here, it's off now. Now, if you're just doing your links, you'll have to go to that bottom one as well. And while I'm not going to show you the bottom one because I'm doing the whole bar, you ultimately, that's what you'll probably have to end up doing the same thing too. So as I'm taking, I guess, quote unquote, the cheat way out, and I'm not going to bother to take off the bottom. One thing to point out is if you are doing this, and whether you get this top bolt out or get stuck, you're going to want to do the bottom one as well before you take out the top one. The reason for that is now this is hanging, right? And it's a floating, even forgetting I loosened this, and I'll show you that in a second about how to loosen that out. But even before, when that's still tightened on, without the leverage of the top here, it makes it very hard to try, well, harder to try and get this one off. So if you're just doing your link itself, then you're going to want to actually, with this still attached, either A, if you've gotten the nut almost all the way off, or B, if it's seized, you're going to want to work on the bottom one as well. And then once the bottom one, whether state it is, whether you're going to have to cut or not, and of course if you have to cut, watch out you aren't damaging your stabilizer bar. Then once all that is complete, then you go and take off the top and the bottom, complete the rest of the job up, and it'll just make it a little bit easy for you. Now we're going to go ahead. I'm actually going to show you how to take off that this nut right over here. So doing this bolt is considerably easier most times than doing the actual links themselves. The links, like I said, notorious for rusting up. In this case here, though, it's just the same thing. It's a 15 mil. I'm going to put the 15 mil onto my ratchet here, and that goes right on here. Now, if you'll notice, it's got a little notch here. This helps actually when you're loosening it, because it's going to actually push onto the frame, and it's going to help with leverage. So we're going to go and give it a pull up. Most times it actually starts loosening on its own. It's very little effort. You see, I even did that with one hand. And you're just gonna, whoa, there it is. I'm just gonna go with it. Now, probably the only thing to note is that as it gets looser, this one bolt right, this notch right here, I know as the threads come out more, it's gonna start pushing back. And sometimes, if there's corrosion on this bolt, then it'll make it a little bit difficult. All you do is kind of just use the other hand and push it. We're gonna go. It's very hard. Now you can actually, maybe a tip if you want to, is you could drop the exhaust, your exhaust down, and you'll be able to get the power tools in. As you can see, I'm doing this just with a ratchet, no problem. But if you want to take the time to drop the exhaust, you can, and then you'll be able to get your ratchet in. Or if you've got a single exhaust, then you can at least do one bolt because you won't have the exhaust piping in the way. This case here, though, as you can see, a ratchet just does fine. So let's get back to it quickly here. There. Now once that's off, this just lifts right up. You can drop the bar right out of it. Now I'm actually not going to drop it yet because I got to do the link. And if I drop that down, it'll change the position of the link, which is right over here a little bit. So I'm not going to drop it out completely yet, but you can see now all you got to do is when you push this up, you can just take your hand and push down, and it'll release from the rubber here, from the boot. So now let's go ahead and cut off that link. Okay, so I'm about to cut, and before I cut, I just want to let you know that as you saw earlier in the video with the other side, I did loosen this off a bit. You're going to want to loosen it up as much as you possibly can because you want to be able to get the cutting blade in to cut. The more room you have, the less you'll have to cut. Like right now, I couldn't get it out. This one's seized actually further in than the other side. The other side came almost all the way out and just wouldn't go anymore. Whereas this one's barely, so I'm actually going to have to cut through that nut in the back to get through. The other side I actually didn't have to. Because it came with just enough, I was able to slide the cutting blade through and cut through. Made it a lot easier. It would be a lot less work. Came off in 30 seconds. This one's going to require a little bit more. Before we go ahead and we begin with this, I just want to advise again, extreme safety must be taken with this. Both for yourself and your own well-being. Make sure you have gloves on. I won't be wearing gloves. Ignore that. Wear gloves if possible. I have goggles on, and I actually do wear goggles, safety glasses, so that it'll protect my eyes. Very important. Make sure there's nothing flammable or anything in the way. Watch out for any components like the brake lines, for any of the plastic around. In this case, later on in another video, I'll be changing the strut, so I'm not too concerned about it, but you still want to be cautious with it, especially if you're not changing the strut. So again, there's a lot of precautions to take with this, but really, especially when it comes to this, is the only way. So you can see this is my cutter here. Stop for a sec. Now we're going to come in. We're going to go behind. The reason for it is because if you go in the front, especially if you're not changing the struts have a little bit of a lip here. And in order to get through to that lip, you're going to actually have to cut part of the strut, which I'm sure you're not going to want to do. So the point is to cut the link. So we're going to go from the back. It's going to be a lot of sparks flying. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's get to it. As you can see, I'm getting a lot of smoke. Part of where the smoke is coming from, and I did notice on the other side as well, is some of the sparks are flying through here. Nothing is really burning, but it's collecting down the wheel well, which can be a scary proposition. I did check and it was okay, but a lot of the smoke you're seeing is it collecting and then coming through the wheel well. I would still now while I've checked it out and it didn't seem anything wrong with just the burn, not even burning embers, just the smoke itself was piling through and then billowing out. I still advise to exercise caution in the matter. Also, when you're checking this or anything, I say to get a mirror or something to check behind, or just give it an eye. Be very careful. As you're cutting, this, of course, will get extremely hot. And so you want to be exercising caution with that as well. All right, so I got it out. very hot. I'll show you quickly there. That's now cut clean. Now, to go back to the previous part here, now it's a good time that you can pull this piece up and drop that down. Now, this is now down, and you're good. So now we got to take it out. Okay, so we're going to maneuver this out now. I've actually maneuvered it part of the way. Of course, it is easier to take it off if you have these out, but it can be moved. The main thing, of course, is if you have a dual exhaust, is getting it around the dual exhaust. And especially mine, where it was actually a single exhaust and I modified it to a dual exhaust. A little bit tricky. Let me see if I get a good angle for you guys. So I've already moved it out. Now, what you're essentially doing is getting the links and everything around the strut assembly. Once you do that, and it's over the exhaust, then it's just a matter of sliding it out and around. And then you get to a certain point about here, you should be able to twist, bring it up and around the exhaust, clearing everything else. It is a little bit of a tricky scenario, but it can be done. It just takes a little bit of maneuvering. I'm moving it here, and just to show you, it's coming around top here over the exhaust, and then the wheel well. Now the wheel well here has a bit of a concave part. You want to try and work with that, and then it's right now it's going around. As you can see, it's pretty much cleared the entire system on that side. What I am trying to do is get this part here without scraping or damaging anything to clear. Once we do that, it will move on. So we're just going to keep doing that here. And again, this comes back to, if you want to do this a little bit easier, sometimes it's easier just to drop the exhaust down and avoid some of these issues. But we have to work with it here. After the realization that I'm putting actually a bigger sway bar in, as you can see, it's out there. After that realization, I realized that if getting this one out is this much trouble, getting the new one in may be just equally as much trouble. So I dropped one of the mufflers down. Now, I will tell you that again, I don't think this will be as much of an issue as if you have a stock setup versus an aftermarket setup, but it may be something to consider. But as you can see, I just released the two rubber mounts, one on each side, from the chassis itself, and the muffler is now just hanging. And then I was able to maneuver and get the stabilizer bar out. Without doing that, I couldn't get it out. But that gave me enough room and leverage to get the bar out. Again, I don't think you'd have as much problems with a stock system. But yeah, now it's out, so we're good to continue moving. Yeah, we're just doing another comparison now, just the ways to be sure. As you can see, the shape, angle, and everything lines up. So they're good. And of course, as you know, before we compared our links, so they're good as well. Now, this is an aftermarket bar for Grand Prix and so on. You can see there's two bolts there. So what I did is I took that one and this one here, and I lined it up, and I realized it's the first inner bolt that it'll be going to. So I'll actually not be putting the links on beforehand, just to make it maneuverable, a little bit more maneuverable underneath the car. And we're going to go and put this bar back now, but first thing is we got to add the bushings on. So the bushings are these here. They're standard rubber bushings. You can actually buy poly ones as well, but this just came with the bar itself. It's what I'm going to use. So what it is, so if you remember that bracket that lifted up and over, that's what fits into this groove. So ultimately that's going to have to be on the outside. But when this goes on, it really doesn't matter, because you'll be adjusting it once you bolt everything up. So we're just going to fit this right onto here, and it goes right up against here. You can do that for the same for the other side as well. A little harder to do with two hands, but there. See? And now the bar's ready to go in. So doing this part is a little bit tricky in the sense that the bushings are brand new, so they're actually quite hard. Therefore, they're also a little bit tricky to kind of get in to fit into this bracket. But it can be done. I've actually done the other side first. I did it as a test fitting just to be sure. As you can see, obviously I got the bar in. The muffler is still hanging. I still have to reattach. But just open. Oops. Let's get that back. So you bring the bar up and turn this upward. And then we're going to put this in here. And then this, you're going to push, see right here? It's going to push right in. So the rounded part fits in as snug as possible. Now this is the tricky part, so once it's done, you're going to pull this down here. But because this is all brand new and tight and firm, it's very hard to do. So, then we're going to take the bolt, we're going to put it through. Make sure that little piece there sticking out from on this side. I'm going to fit that on and push it down as much as possible. And then put your nut on. Just enough to catch it. That's what I mean. This is the tricky part. Now once it's done, remember this piece is sticking out here, and this is on. You're going to grab your 15 mil once again. And you're just going to tighten. Now I didn't tighten all the way yet because we still want to do the links and make any necessary adjustments. Whoa. Sorry if I'm blocking again, it's kind of awkward right here, but it is what it is. See, I'm tightening, and as I'm tightening, this gets into position, and it's within the groove. It's where it's supposed to be. You tighten and bring it in. I'll go about that far. Before we tighten further, though, you want to set up your links, because once you tighten, it'll be very hard to kind of move and adjust this. So we're going to do that now. So now we're going to set everything up. I've already taken the nuts off, but you can see this is what a piece I was talking about. For example, I was trying to use the wrench to hold it on. So we're going to go and put this side through first, then we put the nut on. Now once that's on, then we set the bar. We do the same thing. Once we set the bar in the correct position, there. And then from this point, we get the power tools and we start tightening everything up. Now this is the last piece of the puzzle here, and what I want to show you is actually this. As you can see, I've jacked up the car, just specifically I've jacked up at the trailing arm, and lifted the car on the rear end so the suspension sits roughly where it would sit on day-to-day driving. This is particularly important because when you're tightening up these bolts right over here, you want the suspension to be sitting at roughly as close to possible driving, or would be sitting where the car would be sitting. Now, before we get tightening, do make sure you check the sizes of everything. This is particularly imperative because sometimes the aftermarket ones could be different, as is the case here. This is actually a Moog one, which Moog is a pretty good brand. I like them, and as you saw earlier, it is a thicker bar. That also meant that the inside nut was thicker as well. This is still a 15 mil out here. That's still a 15, but inside on the stock ones were 14, but on these new ones they're actually 18. So keep this in mind as well. So same thing though to tighten everything up as you put your wrench on. Now you don't want to use power tools on this because this actually connects. You can't. Okay, you could, and it'll be a lot easier. I don't recommend it because this actually connects right into here, and there is some risk that if you spin this, and if one, you could damage the inner nut that's in here, but you can also damage some of the internal components if it spins, because it's not meant to really spin around in there, right? So I recommend just going by hand for this, which is what we're going to do here now. So, and it's not that terribly hard to do, right? Just put your, in this case here, it's an 18 mil and my 15 mil on. And we're just gonna go at it. Again, watching for things like the brake line and everything that's here. And the idea will be that you go until it is tight enough. Let's see, kind of an awkward angle for me, but that's not a problem. This actually, I can tell you, will be a little bit easier to do. I'm trying to do it in such a way that you guys can still see, which is not the easiest, but you get the idea. So, wrench on, and we just go at it. And you want to do it now. Once you get tight, then you want to give it another about half turn or so. I don't know what the torque specification is, and honestly, I tried looking for it for you guys because I like to make sure I give you the best information possible, and I couldn't find it. If anyone watches this video and happens to know what the torque specifications are, please leave it in the comments. I would appreciate that, because I want to make sure that when people are doing this job, they're doing it the best way possible. I don't like the, oh, quarter turn business. I like to say, oh, you know, 40 foot-pounds or whatever it is. So right now it's tight. Go up, and we're gonna go up more, and there. You do the same for the bottom as well. Now you can't really see the bottom, well you can a little. It's right there, and it's the same idea. You put your wrench on this inner one here, and then on the outside here. Now, I'm not going to waste your time anymore. I'm actually going to stop the video because you get the idea. This is pretty straightforward. Do the same for both sides before you've tightened up this outer bolt here, because I'll show you that next. You can go ahead and tighten this bolt up. And same thing with this one. I unfortunately could not get a torque specification, but this one here, you go all the way till tight, and then go another about half turn or so, quarter to half, and that's not going anywhere. I got to do the other side as well. Now once this is done, drop the car back down, then you can lift the car up at the subframe at the center or wherever it is. In this case I also have to put the muffler up, so if you drop the muffler, do not forget to put the muffler back up. Remove your jack stands, drop your car with the wheels on, tighten up all the wheels, go for a test drive, and see how it goes. Hopefully this video guys helped you guys out. Now again, even keeping in mind that I've gone with the upgraded bar, you don't have to do that. You can go with just a standard GM bar or any aftermarket bar as long as it's the right one, and this will the same procedure. As you can see, once done, it fits nice and firm, and you can enjoy your new ride on your Grand Prix. Thank you very much, or actually any Impala, anything. I want to thank you guys very much for watching, and see you in the next video.